All right, so welcome to everyone, and Colonel Tracy, welcome. We'd love if you could start us off, if you could maybe just give us your initial thoughts on where the Marine Corps is and 3MEF in particular regarding force design, and maybe touch on some of your experiences with 4th Marines kind of really championing that right at the beginning of this this fun journey. Over to you, sir.
Hey, thanks a lot, Dylan, and thanks a lot to everybody in the Warfighting Society. I'm very excited and quite honored that you would invite me to engage. You have a bold set of goals, and they're admirable and necessary. So Dylan and Damien, just first, let me just say what a thrill it is. Secondly, I think the first part of your question is the most important, which is, where are we? And my first answer, which would dominate the rest of all of my answers, is we are very close to China. 3MEF, 4th Reg, 3rd Marine Division, probably the most important thing that colors the discussion is the proximity, both at the bottom of the Japanese archipelago, its proximity to Taiwan, the Miyako Straits, the Straits of Luzon, the Tsushima Straits, and of course our key competitors, both Russia, North Korea, and China. That wholly dominates all thinking in regards to everything else with 3MEF. It is inseparable, it is oppressive, it is 100% in everything we do and everything we think. So that's the first perspective that you have to realize when discussing anything else with the Marine Corps or the entire Joint Force. The second thing, in terms of this entire discussion, which colors the entire thing, which is the Marine Corps nests within a larger ecosystem of what I would term the community of interest of people who are on the forward edge in the first island chain. So that community of interest, which is the security professionals of the entire Joint Force, which would be 18th Air Wing, which would be 7th Fleet, 1st of the 1st, Special Forces, but that we are part of that ecosystem, but also Japanese Western Army, JGSDF, JASDF, Japanese Air Self-Defense Force, Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force, Japanese Coast Guard. There is an entire security ecosystem that we plug into. Now we can go back to force design. So the Marine Corps had I would term it a singular focus for, I don't know, since the Incheon landing. I'm not sure how far it goes back, but in terms of the national security in the Western Pacific, basically it focused on one competitor, perhaps two, in a sense, in terms of Russia, but the Cold War was a different beast. The Marine Corps, in particular 3MEF, was focused singularly across the Tsushima Straits. But in the intervening last 20 years, or really from, I guess, 1991 is the watershed where China really began to invest and watch what we did during Desert Storm. You saw a new competitor, potentially an existential threat, rise up. So prior to the summer of 2019, you had people like yourselves, when I was a younger man, who was looking at this problem and thinking that our focus and how we're trained, manned, and equipped was potentially not going to address that problem. And so, General Berger, 1MEF, then MAR4 PAC, and CD&I, he had a keen eye towards what was happening in the Western Pacific, and he had a keen eye to where the Marine Corps was. So when he dropped the force design 2030 in the summer of 19, it was met out here, was in terms of Monty Python, much rejoicing, right? At that time, I had just become the G5, and we were struggling to adapt the campaign plan, which just in the course of 18 and 19, General Smith had taken some steps to revise 3MEF's campaign plan, but 2020, Force Design 2030 allowed a Zeitgeist for General Clarity to now do a wholesale revision of the campaign plan. So it was also the aligning some very aggressive and forward-thinking people, General Clarity being one at 3MEF, General Journey at Division, General McPhillips at the MAW. Really an incredible amount of enthusiasm for change, needed change, and has created a incredible wellspring of thinking and action at 3MEF that has now carried on for several years in a very exciting and dynamic place. I'll stop there. So that's kind of sets the context of a year as I'm the G5, and then transitioning into command. What that allowed me to do is be able to see several terrain features into the future, and I had developed implicit communication with the CGs, which allowed me to have operational change at a relevant tempo.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Yeah, and I think you set us up for that perfect segue into your time with 4th Marines. I mean, what did you see at the tactical level with your battalions rotating in and, kind of developing JWTC up north and all the other exercises that you started and you and your staff started putting together? How did that, manifest in practical realities during your time as in command?
Right. So from I'm going to try and as a self-proclaimed but novice applicator of maneuver warfare, I'll continue to try and tie this back to that for the development of each other. So when the environment changes, right? So what drives change in your OODA loop in the decide act is when the orientation changes, right? And what are the drivers for the orientation are going to be the environment, friendly, or enemy. So if there's significant changes in one of those three, two of those three, three of those three, well, now it's time for you to decide and act differently. I participated in a phenomenal UDP deployment in, right there at the cusp of Y2K, 99 to 2000, or 2000 to 2001 with 3.8. I would return 15 years later in 2014, 15 with 3.3, and I executed the exact same TEEP almost to the day. Just happened to line up. Those were both December UDPs, December into the spring. We did the exact same thing with the exact same mission. And it made me think that between 2000 and 2015, what had changed? Well, certainly the environment had changed and the enemy had changed, which would then lead one from an organizational standpoint to say, okay, decide and act needs to be different. So, step one would be like listing out the things more specifically that had changed. And one in particular, as I was entering command in 2020 was one, the mission. Okay, that's huge, right? Two, potentially new equipment, which was slow at the beginning, but would come out with greater and greater change, in particular, the 1st IBX battalion. Also, the enemy's space-based capabilities and their ability to sense in the space, SRO, AGI, essentially their collect capabilities had increased dramatically. So that begins to craft an idea of how you want to, or what is required for you to reorient your mission, the objectives, your outcomes, the effects that you want to achieve. Speaking in particular, the Marine Corps was changing at the time, and MWX had come to the forefront out there in 29 Palms, which was meant to replicate a war with a, air quotes, near peer competitor. When I went, one of the first things that we did, I took over in the middle of COVID. For those who hadn't experienced COVID in 3MEF, was fairly intense with the government of Japan. So I would say woefully underprepared to go to MWX and feel the heat of what that felt like, which then, you know, drove home in a most evocative manner what we were up against and how far we had to go as a unit, as a division, as a MEF. So I wanted to create something similar, albeit not in the desert, because the battlefield that this would occur in 3MEF would of course be on islands. They would be in the jungle. And so those present a grave set of unique challenges, which further complicated or changed the MWX paradigm. But we wanted to replicate the MWX paradigm in the northern training area with a force on force, but that also involved this joint ecosystem, right? Because we were not going to fight singularly. MWX gives you this idea, and a thing that continues to, I think, plague the Marine Corps. I'm glad we can talk about the Warfighting Society, is that we exist within the ecosystem, right? A JWX out here could, if sold and planned correctly, could tap into this community of interest of people who live in the first island chain and really want to get after these problems. So JWX could include cruisers, it could include fighter aircraft, it could from fighter aircraft from 18th Wing, it could include crew des from 7th Fleet, it could involve fighters from JASDEF coming out of Naha, it could include F-35s coming out of Iwakuni, right? So, and it's actually a lot easier to do because one, people live here full time, two, people are very interested in getting after these, three, they're very interested in integrating with the Marine Corps. And so we had an opportunity to kind of stitch these things together in a environment that better matched what we thought the battlefield of tomorrow will look like out here. The second thing, going back to the first point, is you'll do it live and you'll do it in front of the enemy and they will watch, right? So it's not anything we do, any, you know, exercise turns into a operation, right? And this is, I think, the critical distinction that I began to try and make. And all of 3MEF is there right now, in that there are no such thing as exercises out here anymore, because nothing is happening in a vacuum. It's everything from you walking to chow, and do you walk to chow, you know, in every facet of your deployment, of your life out here, you have an opportunity to reflect something into the ecosystem or into the competitive space. I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And then I'll just throw one more your way. This is good, and then we'll start opening up some questions because I'm sure there's lots from the audience here. But so as you implemented that in 4th Marines, and then now that you've headed up to the MEF, what are you seeing are some of the big obstacles and challenges to fully kind of implementing this, this new decide and act phase as the whole joint force is reoriented in light of China and in light of the Marine Corps' initiatives with force design? Yeah, what's holding us back from further doing this and getting to an even more effective end state?
Well, like any organizational change, right, it's exceedingly difficult. So first I want to say that what did Steve Jobs say, that focus and innovation is saying no to 999 great ideas so that you can focus on the one, right? The problem is that the complexity, well, and the incredible amount of change requires that we have to do many things simultaneously. It is exceedingly difficult when you're trying to change such a large swath of your organization, right? So challenge number one would be, right, like, what is it that you focus on, in what sequence, right, with what money, with what people, right? And if you can only do a few of them, perhaps you could do a few things well, or you could do many things average, or you could do lots of things poorly. So there's a discussion of, like, let's just take kill webs, maritime strike. Exceedingly difficult to do, an incredible space to grow into and to revolutionize the Marine Corps. First, you have to let go of the past in enough quantity in order you gather that time, people, resources, money, in order to change in that to that direction. But when you do that, you find that there's this entire tail in terms of what I would call the sinews of war. And the sinews of war, your logistics, your depth, your communication infrastructure, those things. So, there's a risk that we're not changing broadly enough, but then you're faced with then we need to focus, those things. Secondly, again, we live in this ecosystem of the joint fight, right? So there's a risk of not being able to connect up into the ecosystem, which many people are understanding that, many people are working through that, but like, that's a large complexity in itself, because the joint force has to also change, right? So the third part is you got to be ready now, right? There's no like hit the timeout button and then like the world stops so that we can get after changing, right? General Berger has also been so successful in his narrative across the Paul Mill divide, aka Congress, that he is both a thought and action leader across the joint force. Consequently, what's happening is everybody has said, we are also going to change. We are also going to metamorphose into this a new futuristic capability. And when everybody is changing, then that leaves the Indo-PACOM commander to say, like, whoa, what if you're all changing and you're all going to have some type of off ramp, to reinvest, like, what's in the now space, right? So you have this critical tension between what is it we want to change. We don't want to be too narrowly focused, but then we can't, if we're too broad, then we miss some things. And then that's caught in the tension of the now, which is fight now, fight tonight, like this happens this afternoon, like what are we doing? So these are some critical things that are being wrestled with from, I think, the highest levels of the joint force all the way down to like the platoon commander, company commander level across the MAGTAP.
Great. Thank you, sir. Okay. So I'll open it up to some questions from the audience. I have a few more as well if we run out there, but if you are interested, please just put the little hands up signal on here, and I'll pick you all out one at a time, and we'll go from there. Michael, go ahead. Michael Downing, please start us off. If you could, when you come on, just give a quick introduction of yourself, where you're at, if you're active duty or reserve, what unit you're in, and we'll go from there. Go ahead, Michael.
Sure thing. Thanks, Dylan. So for everyone, I'm Captain Michael Downing. I'm currently the Marine Officer Instructor at the University of Virginia. Prior to that, I was an Executive Officer and a Platoon Commander with Company A, 3rd LAR. And then while I was over there, did 2 sort of 4th Marines UDPs, because within LAR and with 3rd LAR, we chop off a platoon to go on the 31st MU while we're out there. So I was kind of tangentially with the 4th Marine Regiment while I was out there, because I went on the MU both times, but through that got to see a lot of what 4th Marines was doing at the time, and then kind of the beginnings of the transition, both, sir, under your predecessor, under Colonel Perry, and then some of the things that you were getting into as well. And I think certainly what struck me the most, and this is what leads into my question, is both when I was a platoon commander and when I was an XO, I was very surprised by what I at least saw as a disconnect between the planning that was occurring, even down to the company commander level, in terms of their involvement with different war games and different things that were going on, very, very much focused on how are we going to react if something happens. And then at the platoon commander and below level, and certainly down to all the junior Marines, a lack of understanding on what our role would be or how we could immediately react to anything that happened. Between there's some kind of crisis where we're going to have to send forces somewhere, to there is a strike of any variety on any of the bases in Okinawa, all the way up to what I would probably describe as the least likely scenario, which would be some kind of amphibious assault onto the island of Okinawa itself. I was surprised to see that we didn't, at least at my level, did not receive any kind of instructions down to even like, where should we all muster? Because certainly like comms are going to go down. We're not going to have cell phones at that point. Like if something kicks off, where should everyone go? How are we drawing ammo, fuel, any of that, if any of these things should happen? And it felt like that also affected the mentality of the Marines and the way that we viewed being out there. Whereas I saw my leadership at the battalion and the company level feeling a lot of sense of purpose and understanding as to what their role would be with what was going on. So I don't even really think it was a failure in them not communicating what our role was, but it seemed like the junior Marines were not able to grasp tangibly anything that they'd actually be doing in the event that something went wrong. And I felt like that led to some issues with preparedness and to be kind of rude by saying it, an actual like beyond the slideshow, beyond the green boxes and the PowerPoint readiness for the units that were on the ground. So from your perspective, sir, is that something that was changing or that would end up changing or will need to change as we start to implement these force design challenges? Will the Marines at the lowest levels be more integrated into these preparations? And how do you see that changing on the ground in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I appreciate the frankness and honesty there. All right, if we go back to what I originally said, which is divorcing from the old, tyranny of the now. So essentially, right, the idea of like loading up the amphibs, right, and then sorting out to do a amphibious assault like mustering the amphibious task force, right? That is still a mission. And there's still like a future where that is a thing, right? That is like a different, we can think of them as like multiverses, right? So that is a possible future multiverse. Another possible future multiverse is like you're at the chow hall and like missiles start coming into the Hanoko ASP. The two different actions, right, are, I don't know what their probability is, but let's just say like you are getting on the Mew and you are going to do a patrol and you are going to compete in the space with the teeped events that you have. So that is going to help. That is going to happen. So when you have limited resources and time, money, and planners, they're going to devote their time, money to thinking of the thing that's actually going to occur 100%. The different potential multiverses, right, unfortunately receive short shrift because there's only so many hours in the day. So this is the tension that a commander has to make as he budgets his time, he gives directions, et cetera, et cetera. There is certainly growth in alternative multiverses that probably need to start from like worst case scenario and work backwards. My thoughts. We are getting to a place where everybody needs to know where to go, how to talk, where to draw their ammo, like basic fundamentals, right? And that is critically important. 3MEF is getting to that space. Think of the scale and complexity of a MEF, bases and stations, command relationships that were grown, table slapped, resourced to basically be a power projection platform. You're articulating an entire paradigm shift to a base being a defensive outpost, which is where we're getting to. So I'm not making an excuse. What I'm saying is that this highlights Dylan's earlier question, which is what are some of the tensions? The tension is time. The tension is the now, vice the thing we need to get at the future. We're intensely sensitive that what you're articulating is something we need to do a better job at. Again, without more people though, without greater time, it will continue to be second priority to the things that are going to happen, right? The TEEP is going to get executed, 175 exercises across the map, MU deployments. Now we have 2 MUs, right? Like that thing is going to get executed. We need to, and I think this is a thing that probably we need to tap into people who are downstairs, so to speak, that at the like platoon commander level, company commander level, squad leader level, we start like figuring this out ourselves, creating an SOP that gets turned over with each UDP unit, right? You think about what's going on at 4th Reg, 1,000 new Marines come in every 6 weeks, right? So like that's, in terms of an organization, that speed is like hypersonic, right? So to be able to turn over, this is the plan, right? And this is where you go and this is what you do, right? In a PDSS, where the Advon shows up and essentially you're like, do these trucks work? Yes or no? Where's the SL3 gear? And that takes up the entire time. So we're making a longer PDSS. We're having greater reach back. What we did at 4th Reg is that we just created white hot lines of communication back to the unit that's coming behind you in order to pass those things off. Are we getting there? Yes. Am I wholly satisfied with that? No. Do I have a solution? Yes. It's like work longer and harder. I think we are getting there because the entire map is growing to that place with Mickey Pack, right? Mickey Pack's Mickey Pack is like completely designed to like make sure the electricity is on, right? And that's a full-time job. So we got some growth there. I appreciate you putting your finger on that and grinding it into that large wound I have. So it's good. Already, the Warfighting Society hasn't let me down yet.
We'll try our best, sir. All right, we'll turn it over to someone you may be familiar with, sir. Abe Webb, please, over to you.
Oh man, this is gonna be a tough one then. All right,
Where's you hooding? I'm not a threat anymore.
Yes. Thank you for repping the cut.
Oh, am I coming through now?
Yeah, we got you, Abe.
Perfect. Technology just.
Okay, maybe not. Abe, cut your camera.
Radio check.
Cut your camera. We'll come right back to you. All right, Gabe, we'll go over to you while we wait for Abe to reboot here.
Hey, sir. Good evening here from DC. Question here: as the character of warfare changes, what remains consistent with the way we train and fight, and then what is changing that we're whistling past the graveyard on, specifically with force design? Interested in your thoughts, sir. Thank you.
Man, if I knew this was just going to be like a blast from your past best friends of the Corps, this would be a lot less stressful. Just I know that the questions you guys are going to ask, freaking, over the moon, hard hitting. Good to see you, Gabe.
Yeah, yes, sir. Good to see you too.
All right, say your question again. I was just so stoked that both I get to see Webb and you in the same 30 seconds.
Yes, sir. The question is based on what's the changing character of warfare now. What remains consistent with the way we train and equip and fight, and then what things are changing that we're whistling past the graveyard on in terms of force design and the way we train and fight. Over.
Yeah, they should just have a podcast with you, since if we want to talk about 4th Reg and the changes to it, like essentially you're the one that broke trail, and then I just made everybody follow you. You probably be a better, there it is. You probably have the better tactical insight. I would say, what's MCDP1, and Clausewitz, they're going to say that like the character of warfare never changes. It's friction filled, chaotic. It'll be a human event. It'll be highly contentious, emotional. What's changing out here is that probably the families are going to be intermixed, right? And so so the amount of friction and chaos, pain, commitment required, decisions, that is going to be incredibly challenging. The United States hasn't faced that since, I don't know, the War of 1812, aside from like a long range strike into Hawaii, but right. So that is going to be fundamentally different out there. It's going to be like Ukraine-esque. So the nature, but you're talking about the character. What I would say is that what I'm increasingly seeing is that as we reorient to be a better partner or subordinate to the JIFMIC, we're talking about a maritime fight, right? A maritime fight that we're trying to grow to is wholly distinctive in that we're talking about really high-end communications. We're talking about like really like the battle for assured communication space, right? It's like if we can cyber, so if we can't do that, right, then like everything else becomes negated, right? So I'm seeing like the intellectual requirements and the technical capabilities of that are going to permeate the entire Marine Corps. That game needs to come up so high. And I'm thinking that how difficult that is going to be. Meanwhile, like the volume of this fight, like somebody made the comment the other day that Japan and Germany's GDPs in World War II added together about was the United States's, right? We're talking about a GDP of a competitive here that is on par with us, right? So there's just the volume required, I think, is something that the United States has not been accustomed to. Marine Corps, certainly. The other characteristic is the size and scope of an Asian megacity, right? I think that for those of you who haven't done a Westpac or haven't traveled a lot in Asia, until you stand in an Asian megacity you've never heard the name of, you get an understanding of just the size, scale, scope of the society out here. You go to Kuala Lumpur, or you go to Seoul, or you go to wherever you want to go to, and you look out and see, you know, this, I mean, when you see an apartment building that's, you know, 40 stories, and then there's apartment buildings of that size out to the horizon, and then you spin around in 360 degrees, and there's apartment buildings in 360 degrees out to the horizon, you begin to understand the scale and scope of what Asian megacities and war would be like in that. The other thing is that it also goes down. So you go 10 floors below the street, and there's an entire city under there, right? So it's, I think that's the first. The second is the distances that we're talking. You know, Commandant's message discussed going into Camp Rhino, longest, you know, infill over a cycle of darkness, 340 miles. You know, that's about 50 miles longer than from Naha to Taipei, right? And that was like the longest one we'd ever done. So just the distances, the technological requirements to be able to play in the maritime game, space game, the air game, is an incredible requirement that the Marine Corps has taken upon. Asian megacities, maritime space, the airspace, right? These are unbelievable changes and challenges to the Marine Corps. I think we're getting after it. Are we getting after it with the speed? Are we making the really hard investments to get after it? Are we saying no to the things, the old, so that we can accelerate towards the future at a speed relevant to the enemy? That's, I think, the question. That's the big whistle past the graveyard. You know, we're holding on to the old, and it's hampering our ability for the new. Matt Tracy's opinion, right? And like every time he'd ask me that question, I'd probably from my seat out here at 3MEP, you know, I'm not sure it would ever be enough, right? So like you would ask me, we could make even bolder changes, and I would still say the same thing. So that's probably not a fair and sumptuous answer.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, if I could, just a quick follow on, and I don't mean to jump on here, but precision fires versus massive fires is something that I think that at least my group is kind of struggling with here. We grew up under suppression as the critical task. I think that that's still something that they're teaching at the basic school and infantry officers course. Thoughts on kind of a reorientation to long range precision fires versus the ability to suppress, knowing that that's critical to either close with the enemy or deliver effects inside of an engagement area. Over.
Right. So we're mixing like two. That discussion is, I think, a great example of we're mixing two versions of what the fight is going to be at, because our lexicon and our doctrine are basically built around the mobile assault course and 29 palms and range 400, right? Which is at the small unit level, we're going to mass fires through suppression in order to enable maneuver. That is completely, it is very difficult to take that intellectual paradigm or template and then overlay that onto a maritime fight in which we're assisting the JIFMIC in the accomplishment of their tasks. So it's like, so that boils down to like mass volleys against a surface action group. That we try and conflate those two things, right? If the mission is, and what I think is really interesting is that the original infantry OPTs sought to change this at both the tactical level in that old paradigm, and you saw that really great article about, in the back and forth with our senior retired leaders, which was how would you do range 400 differently? The idea being that if you use your exquisite collect to find the C2 node, and then you have a precise fire on the C2 node, then it allows for maneuver, which you couldn't do before. Extrapolating that up to if you have a SAG and it's guarding an amphibious task force, if you could just hit the amphibious task force, the critical capability, the bid for success, then you're winning. But what that's doing is that it's taking the 29 palms model of ground combat and trying to extrapolate that up into the JIFMIC blue water fight, right? It's difficult to have a conversation in which you're not talking past each other, right? So I'm going to say precise fires into the maritime space that are in concert and coordinated across the joint force in order to either one, enable maneuver, or to hit the thing that you actually need to hit, right? And so the precision is the way of the future. Now, again, our next problem, right? So we talk about building the multi-domain corridor. We talk about, right, we started this at 4th Marine Reg when we saw the requirement that if we wanted to move anywhere to an A2 AD environment, that we had to punch a hole in that lattice work, right? Or that force field. And that right there is a multi-domain kinetic and non-kinetic fires episodic window, right? And so that has to be, so think of it, we call it the 3-dimensional sync matrix. So your classic sync matrix that has your maneuver units or the warfighting functions are down the vertical axis, time across the horizontal axis. There then also is a Z-axis that goes 3-dimensionally, which is the coordination of kinetic and non-kinetic fires on the enemy of space, ISR, air, maritime, subsurface, gray zone, PAFM, right? all that needs to be coordinated so that you can make this window in time on a path where you can pulse assets back and forth. Our challenge is that we cannot do that organically. And so that has to be coordinated in and amongst the joint force and the partners, which then means it has to be done at higher level headquarters. But higher level headquarters, going back to Captain Downing's question, right? They're not doing tactical nug work of three-dimensional corridors and three-dimensional sync matrix, right? They don't have like somebody who does all that. So you're going to need both precise fires and a high volume of fires. But if I had to choose one, I would choose precise fires, right? But don't conflate these two discussions of a GIFMIC fight and then try and overlay that on range 400, right? Make sure that when you're going to have the conversation, you're going to say, okay, and this is in the, whatever. This is a range 400, which is still going to be intensely different than an Asian mega city, right? So like, and there's no math equation that's going to say, well, in an Asian mega city, I'm going to need X number of like 155. Like, I don't even know what that looks like. Like, I don't know what that multiverse is. And like, but like, I think where General Berger wants us to be is in the GIFMIC fight, like, how are we doing what? And I think your answer is precise. All right.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. All right, we'll jump back to Abe Webb. I think you're back with us. Or
So
not.
as requested, I'm killing the video. How do you read me?
We got you. Go ahead.
Cool. Sir, good to see you again. My name's Abe. I was a platoon commander under then Lieutenant Colonel Matt Tracy at Trinity. And he really inspired me to stay in the fight for reasons that those who know. So I'm very, very grateful to see that you're still affecting change at an operational level, sir.
Well, thank you. That's a nice compliment. You totally don't know what I am and am not doing. I like to think I'm affecting operational change, but I'm probably just flailing and struggling. Your camera worked long enough for you to show off your Trinity cut, so I appreciate that. Yes.
I'll see if I can do I was getting non-kinetic effects there earlier, so
Right.
okay.
So
So my introduction, I work at INDOPACOM now in the J7, and people would think, oh, INDOPACOM J7, you guys do like exercises and theater security cooperation and all these really, really staff heavy events. But the J7 has been around for less than a year now, and our not our mission statement, but it's well understood throughout the directorate that exercises are now rehearsals. So we are aware, and you'd mentioned things like Project Tripoli, Convergence, Overmatch, Force Design 2030, all of these things that the other services kind of siloed, figured out, and INDOPACOM has put his money where the mouth is, so to speak, with PIMTech. And that's where I work, and I'm the Marine Corps integrator for PIMTech, and I got to spend some time with Major Fultz. Yes, sir. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I've been looking for the INDOPACOM PIMTech guy for like several weeks now, so this already paid off huge.
Sir, and to your point, not to, just jump on the propaganda train, but when you said that you don't have someone that's synchronizing the three-dimensional sync matrix, I want to let you know that I'll do that now.
Yes.
So that's those are the things that I find important, and I also wanted to talk to you separately, and I guess via official channels, but your jungle warfare exercise or the joint warfighter exercise, which the JWX you were talking about. I wanted to ask you more about that, and if you would be interested in me socializing that in the J7.
Jungle warfare. So yes, 100%. There's Charlie Richardson wrote a Gazette article. It appeared in July Gazette, why JWX is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Unteeped, right? A completely novel way to do an exercise in the competition space, in that it appeared nowhere in the administrative footprint. And what happened was, like, combro rel, in which you're like, you know, hey, I'm gonna have this throwdown, I'm gonna have this rumble in the jungle. We're gonna have some good comms out there. Do you want to jump in? And they're like, yeah, I'll be driving my aircraft carrier by there. And then we're like, sweet. And then you drive down to like 18th Air Wing, like, hey, this aircraft carrier is coming. Do you guys want to mix it up with like a kick-ass air battle over, and then the winner, gets air superiority? And they're like, yeah, that sounds rad, right? And then so like pretty soon, like Japanese self-defense, JASDAF, ships, boats, jets, it's pretty it was pretty sick. Replicated that a couple times, you try and get things to line up, but what it does is gets everybody cut their teeth in what a Pacific battle would look like, basically on the battlefield of tomorrow. If I can just turn this into a quick work meeting, because the Warfighting Society is basically all of my friends apparently. So Indo-PACOM heretofore, the last 30 years, when they run these exercises, essentially they put an OST over the top, which is essentially admin organization that puts it together, for those of you who don't know, and has all the responsibility and no of the authorities. And essentially it's like when there's a libo incident or something happens, like you call this person, you don't have shitters where they're supposed to be, or like and then each service gets their silo. Like you have Crow Valley from this date to this date in the Philippines, you go do your live fire. And then you have it Marine Corps for this time. Abe, what we need to do is we need to start exercising like we fight, which essentially there'd be like one person in charge, because you can't do a kill web unless one person is in charge of like the TOT, right? So like everybody has got to work for somebody, and we are continuing to replicate a bad habit, which is everybody goes there and everybody's in their own parochial silo, getting after their own training objectives. So when you look at Bala-Katan 23, we have worked very hard to try and lead up the chain, to try and at least rep out one time where General Bargeron is going to be able to synchronize. He's going to be in charge of the assets so that he can maneuver and defend and synchronize that thing. The only person I've heard who doesn't think this is a good idea is Indo-PACOM J7.
Really? Okay.
And I get it, it's bucking like 30 years of tradition. I realize the Marine Corps has been part of that. From my understanding, the last time we tried to do this was like 3 years ago, 4 years ago in Thailand, where the Army was in charge, and then the Army said there's a 1 beer limit, and the Marine Corps said that's bullshit, 2 beers. And then they said, you're not the dad of me. And so
right,
you can see
yeah,
how this is very So it's inefficient to do it like this in the exercise because not everybody gets to get after their own training objectives. But if you want to achieve the effects that Indo-PACOM is looking for, you got to put one person in charge.
Yeah, agreed. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. The J7. I'm wondering if it's the exercise folks. So there's
J7 has to walk across the hallway, gasp, to like the 5 and be like, Cobra Gold, what are the effects you're trying to achieve? And then he's like, these are the effects. And then you go start writing your exercise document and you ask yourself, do I have somebody in charge of those effects? Do I have one person who the rose is pinned on and says, General so-and-so, I expect you in using this exercise to get these things accomplished. And he says, what? It's about the Mets and you don't understand. I gotta get my people these things and checklists, right? And then you're like, no. See, we're combining exercises and OAIs, right? And then you're like, you don't understand, J7. Who do you think you are? All right, so that's how it goes.
It's actually, I'm only laughing because it's a little too accurate.
Yeah. Change the world, Abe. You have it in your power. We're just wonks down here stuck on an island shouting from the rooftops.
Awesome.
I'll do my best. I'm sorry. Yeah, not to monopolize. I guess I can actually get to a question.
Yeah.
That wasn't your question, Abe?
No.
All right.
I'm gonna carry the Indo-PACOM banner and say like, no, I'm the combatant commander. I'm in charge on a recorded meeting. So yeah, I'll type out PIMTech. I got that, Dylan. So Colonel Tracy, are you concerned about simultaneous escalation in your AO North and AO South?
No, because essentially it's the same thing I have to do for each one. Essentially, the problem remains the same, which is multi-domain corridor, or as I like to call it, the aquarium walkway. So if you've ever been to a high-end aquarium and like there's a tube that goes through the shark tank to the gift store to buy your plush manatee, right? And there's sharks all over it. That multi-domain corridor, the 3-dimensional sync matrix, that is the thing we have to do regardless, right? Because that movement is going to be contested. The muster is going to be contested. The far end is going to be contested. It's essentially the same thing. So in terms of my preparation and getting the MEF ready to do their thing, I just focus on that. The rest is like a quantity man problem, calculus, math thing, and that's a U problem, a United States problem, a Western world problem, which is the volume.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Abe. Thank you, sir. Joshua Silentik, I think you had your hand up there. Please give us a quick intro and over to you.
Sorry about that. I just spit my dip out. I'm Lance Corporal Silentik. I'm a team leader over at 1st Battalion, 6th Marines on Lejeune. I went to Advanced Infantry Marine course this summer, where I got to work with Lieutenant Colonel Horde, who I'm sure a few of you were familiar with, and got to talk to him a lot about Force Design 2030 and how that is affecting us on the minute tactical level, the squad, platoon, that level. And my question for you, sir, was how does this, and I know it might be a little off, but how does all of this affect not just 2nd Marine Division, but that's my big question, because when we train, I'm sorry if I'm a little all over the place right now, but a lot of our training is focused on a fight towards, at least over here in 2nd Marine Division, we're looking a lot at Russia. I just want to know, how do you see Force Design 2030 potentially working for us when we go to, if we go over to Europe to fight in a conflict there? Because the way that I understand it, and obviously I as a E3 am not privy to everything going on and how we intend to develop this, but how does that work for us in a fight over in Russia? And I have another question to follow on after that, if you don't mind.
All right, so that's a good question. One, so I would just point back to Gabe Diana's question, which is the precision versus mass convo, which is what Second Mardiv is doing is developing this idea that precision in the modern battlefield will be more important than mass. Or doesn't assume that. What it says is that the Marine Corps' contribution in the future fight will be in terms of precision, and that somebody else will do the mass, right? So at the infantry level, Second Mardiv is, and 2MAP is doing a phenomenal job in getting after this. Essentially, can you find and identify the C2 node and destroy that as you close? And that capability, if we can perfect that, is going to be critical anywhere, right? Like, if you're a general and you were fighting a battle or a war and somebody said, hey, I got this incredible unit here that you put it on the battlefield, it's going to find the C2 node, it's going to destroy it. These are, you're fighting somebody that doesn't use, this is not an all volunteer force that you're fighting. This is not people who use mission type orders. They do not have a strong NCO core, right? Like, if you destroy that, it will paralyze the unit and then you can maneuver. I think every general would buy that, right? That's essentially what we're selling. And so that's going to be important in any conflict, right? And I think that's what, when you look at force design writ large, it's changing what we offer to the joint fight. Like, I have something new, better, and different for the joint fight. And the question is, like, one, can we develop that and perfect that? Can we sell it? And do people want to buy it? Just in like a sales organization idea. So, and then that thing is at different scales, as we talked about earlier. One is like doing that for the Navy in a large Pacific battle, but where you're developing down there at your end, it is equally novel, different, and I believe appealing to the joint force, right? So that idea of like precision, which allows you to close, which allows you to maneuver, right? Using other people's mass once you have achieved that advantage or that effect, right? So once they're paralyzed, somebody else can bring in the mass artillery fire and you're on to the next thing. Does that answer the question? I think one of the problems is we conflate that. It's like, well, I'm down here at Second Mardiv and like people are talking about shooting ships with missiles. I don't see any ships out there, and I certainly don't have any missiles, right? No, what we're talking about is precision fires of a niche capability that we could then sell to the joint force. And you guys are getting after that big time.
All right. Yes, sir. That does answer my question somewhat, because it was confusing for me trying to understand Force Design 2030, and the way that I understood it was we are, as the infantry, switching from being the complete and total main effort to being primarily a supporting effort for those who we formerly saw as the support. Our logistical capabilities, our ability to maintain sea lines of communication, and the way that I saw it was we're more forming towards being able to maintain those sea lines of communication, being able to maintain those oceanic logistics capabilities. I was just trying to understand more how, as an infantry force, if we are developed very almost solely on supporting those efforts, how we would then be picked up and then moved over to a more inland country where the mission is drastically different from defending and supporting those efforts to now we're going back all of a sudden towards the more traditional infantry task of find the enemy, destroy the enemy.
Yeah, so that's, I don't think we're going back to that of find the enemy and destroy it. It's find the C2 node and destroy that. And oh, by the way, they're hunting your C2 node, right? And so now you have to hide your C2 node and destroy theirs, right? Essentially, is that if it's difficult to conceptualize how small the Marine Corps is, because you walk around and I walk around the base and there seems to be a lot of Marines. And I go to the chow hall and there seems to be a lot of Marines. But when you actually just take a scale up, there's so few of us. We're there. We're not like you, nor do we want the Joint Force to expend these incredible, beautiful, hardest, meanest, smartest group of people in the United States with the greatest fighting spirit, the only ones who could do maneuver warfare, the most physically fit. We do not want to expend them in closing with a, you know, whatever, a bunch of people pulled out of prison or newly mobilized to essentially sit in a trench face forward and depress the trigger. We want to expend this exquisite group in a very exquisite mission, which is finding the C2 node, destroying it, and then moving on to get the next one while somebody else does that work, right? Whether that's the Ukrainians, whether that's Japanese, whatever, right? And so I think we kind of get wrapped up in the like, it's a big Marine Corps fight, like this is what we do. It's, we want to do one very specific thing for the Joint Force that we, the Marine Corps, see as critical and future leaning, which is destroy that C2 node while protecting ours.
Hey, sir, if I can jump in. So what no shit at the company or platoon or squad level do you need Marines to show up out there to 3MEF ready to do then? What discrete task at a company, platoon, squad level do you need that young warfighter to accomplish? Over.
Right, so it's we've almost made it cliche and a bumper sticker that's lost meaning, but right, sense. So they need to see out into, okay, so first you got to find the C2 node. So how are they going to do that? You're going to look, they have to sniff it out. They have to search for it optically. They have to be able to, you know, identify that thing. And then they need to strike it, right? And so how that they got to maneuver to a space close enough to strike it based on the capabilities of the weapon systems that they have. So if you have a 9mm, you're going to have to get really, really close. If you have like Switchblade, then you have a better situation, right? The other thing is they can't get themselves found, right? Which is like a bigger problem because currently we're like overmatched in the sensing. So they have to hide again, I'll make another Monty Python reference, like that bunny that flies around and bites everybody's neck, right? It's like an Arctic hare. So it needs to be able to hide and then fly around with those teeth. For me specifically, I think from an organizational is the defense. We historically have not embraced the defense because we've been a power projection capability, and that was the niche thing that we sold across, across the sea and land space with an amphibious assault. Like, not since Wake Island have we really like thought deeply about the defense. But that's what I'm looking for UDP units to come out with, is a better understanding of the defense, how to strike at the advancing enemy C2, how to identify their main effort, their critical vulnerabilities, and be able to strike at that while still not being found, are critical. The second thing is, we historically have been these cross-domain warriors that both bridge the sea and the ground. Anytime there's a domain boundary, you're having a somebody needs to be there at the interchange. So I essentially need Anglico is what I need. I need a ton of Anglico who can step down air to ground, air to water, water to ground, ground to water. There's other boundaries that I can't wholly visualize, which are in the non-kinetic areas. But essentially, that's what I need, is these boundary warriors. And my best template so far is Anglico. That is essentially the skill level I need. And if I could make, for example, I have a critical requirement for a, I'm not even sure what it's called, the air artillery defense operations coordinator, an ADOC, right? Like, we don't have these, or we have like one per map, and like I need a lot of those. So and that's a boundary thing, right? That's ground to sky. We don't have like a joint exchange, right? Because we have Japanese air defense missiles, we have an Army air defense missiles, and then they're defending a Marine Corps base. Yet we have no one who can, and then like Marine Corps planes are taking off and landing. There's nobody there to, that's a thing. So it's like a defensive Anglico, right? Those are the skills that I need. And that's not like growing on trees, and our throughput's not that good, but that's essentially, when you look at a grunt unit, like, have that skill.
Great. Thank you, Joshua. Sir, I think this kind of pivots to a question from Walker Mills, who had to drop. If we could quickly touch on it, it's germane to this discussion. He says, I wanted to ask about the role of the infantry in expeditionary advanced base operations. It seems to me that most of the missions for Marine units in such operations are focused on non-infantry tasks. He gives examples of securing FARPs, providing defense for long-range precision fires, air defense locations, etc. And then it follows that I challenge the assumption that we should organize our Marine littoral regiments around infantry or have them led by 0302s. I think our inability to move beyond an infantry-centric concept is hurting our ability to be really innovative. Over to you, sir.
Right. So from an organizational standpoint, where are we going to get the people to do all of these tasks that we can conceive of here in the future of flight, right? Essentially, we haven't, we are an infantry-centric organization, and that is because we have a lot of infantry people, and our history and our legends, our sense of selves revolve around this. so he has a very good point. And what he's saying is that our culture, our history, our sense of identity is holding us back from this growth to these new places. And in many respects, I would agree with him. So, you know, Congress pays for a specific number of slots to create the Marine Corps. And where do we have a large number of those slots? It's in the infantry. So if we want to change any portion of the organization, we either need to take grunts and ask them to do those things, or we need to get rid of grunts and then grow something new, which is longer and harder to do. So it would be better if we could tap into this thicker part of our organization to grow to these new places. That comes with a lot of challenges, a lot of emotional discussions. Like I said, you know, it's like, I equate it to like you have like a ton of Yankees fans from New York City. Their whole idea of self is wrapped up in being a Yankees fan from New York City. Their heroes and the people their dads talked about was Mickey Mantle and Yogi Berra. And then we're like, actually, no, what I need you to do is be a cricket fan, you know, from Denver. And it's like, what? No, never. I would never do that. That's ridiculous and stupid. And anybody who says anything but New York Yankees is a fool, let alone playing a different sport. And cricket's dumb and I can't understand it, right? So you're going to have organizational tension when we do that. And you got a commandant says, look, we need cricket fans or players in Denver. This is that is definitely a challenge, and that's something that we're going to have to work through. And then part of all that is wrapped up with this idea of like who does what and who commands what. Those are really hard. Those are really hard things that we have to get through. And I think we need to have an open mind, and we need to understand that we are trying to offer something different to the joint force and the national security apparatus. And, you know, the worst thing we can do is half step and have two things, the old and the new, that are both not that good. Because then they're like, you know what, we don't really need a Marine Corps. You know, so is it Mills or Millis? It's a good.
Yeah, that was Mills. Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's now let me go back though to the infantry and this whole notion of you know, I'm just in a 360 around a missile battery and I hate my life. Like, the better and more effective whatever is you're doing from your position, the more likely it is to be attacked. So if you're not attacked, it means you're not effective and nobody cares and you're being ignored. But the better you are, the enemy has to address that, and the enemy has to come after you, right? Like, it wasn't the grunts on Wake Island that got Wake Island attacked. It was the airstrip, right? That was cutting the enemy's slocks, right? It's not the grunts at Guadalcanal that require the Chinese to drive, or excuse me, the Japanese to drive them off. It's the airfield. That's why, because if the airfield wasn't there and it was first Mar Div sitting on an island in the middle of the Pacific, Japanese wouldn't care and they just go around it, right? So this is the same. It's the same thing that we've been doing for a long time. I think that, like, it's just we're just having a lot hotter conversation about it, right? We don't you take Iwo Jima not because you want to like get in a 360 around Mount Suribachi. You do it there because you're going to put an airfield on there and you're going to project power forward. Well, instead of putting in an airfield, what if you had a missile system, right? It's the exact same thing. So I think this is a straw man that I don't really engage in.
Thank you, sir.
All right, over to Alex. Go ahead.
Good evening, sir. I am a midshipman at the George Washington University over here in DC. So going to OCS this summer. But I just had a few questions for you on partnerships with junior Marines. So kind of going back to Captain Downing's question earlier. But you mentioned working closely or having a closer relationship between like the operational level planning and then like the tactical implementation of those junior Marines. And I guess while minimizing this gap, should the velocity of the changes in force design serve as more of a deterrent or as an accelerant for junior Marines to study? Because a lot of people reference the need to first learn basic skills, basic abilities, especially in ROTC or in boot camp or what have you on either side. But as the battlefield starts to look different, I guess my follow-up is like, what is qualified as those basic skills? Like, does force design now count as like EABO? Is that now a basic skill that you need to learn right alongside like squad level formations? So back to you on that, sir.
That's a totally awesome question. I appreciate you taking what I call dry erase high ground, which is the person who gets to the dry erase board first dominates the planning session, and then you're like put your dry erase boards in behind you. So well done. Yeah, so I've really like struggled with this because I had this thought experiment that like if somebody was like, hey Matt, to better prepare you for your job, I'm going to offer you this time machine, and you can go back to any point in your career and then you can train and study for different things. Like, where do you want to travel to? And I was like, I would go to comm school. Like I would make IOC comm school hybrid, and I would be like super awesome at like being able to communicate through the PACE plan. I'd have this, immediate action drill where it's like, get the satellite up, Tracy. And then I'd like run over there and like get to Tampa, and I'd like find the satellite, and then bam, I'd have like internet access, and then I'd send a chat to somebody. The issue is that the time machine question was like, what stuff are you stepping on? So like, am I not learning an L-shaped ambush, or am I not? So that the 2 weeks I was supposed to go to the rifle range. I definitely believe that this is one of our contentious and most difficult issues, because it's going to be an emotional event for somebody to stop doing something. Like, hey, we're not going to do hand and arm signals, or whatever, dig a fighting hole. So this is having an accelerating effect, and what we're doing is jump back to one of my earlier things about focus, right? What's happening is we're just saying more on top of, right? We're saying like, okay, hand and arm signals and get that Tampa up. This is really a difficult thing. And luckily we have super smart people in different parts of the Marine Corps who are working on that. So I'm gonna like totally dodge this, but that was just a long way of saying that's a really good question. It's gonna be an emotional one, but one that we definitely need to make, because the skills that we're being asked to do or will be asked to do or what we're selling are different skills than what we've been historically taught. And to I think it's Zach's question or Josh's question, that perhaps it's like less, okay, we have this many grunts, we need to take this many grunts, and then they get basic training in these other tasks, right? These other like Like I'm gonna need okay, we got 100 grunts, but I need like 10 cyber marines. So let's take those. And so everybody's learning their same basic skills, but then we have these new MOSs that are growing into new places that have a new start place, which I think and I think that's what's actually going on. I can't speak about the TCOM pipeline, but I know that we got a lot of smart people doing a lot of great stuff on that. Thanks. Good luck at OCS.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not sure what your name is, but it's starts with an R, I think. So over to you for your question.
I think you're talking about RS New York.
Oh, there we go.
The CEO for RS New York. I work with Colonel Tracy on UDP. So very much appreciate the discussion tonight, taking my mind off recruiting duty. But also glad to see the jungle warfare exercise.
Don't you dare take your mind off recruiting. It is the real war. Speaking of no time, speaking of having no time to focus, go ahead. It's good seeing you.
Yes, sir. Good seeing you as well.
Hey, Denny, you're not allowed to ask a recruiting question. Over.
I'll hold my recruiting questions till later on, sir. But I did want to ask from a service level perspective, what's the one thing that we have to get right with force design? And then where are we at right now with getting, that one thing that has to get done, with force design from a service level perspective?
So it's tough to have a reductionist idea because, right, like to boil down such a bold and large change event, professional event here, like it's really hard to say this is the one thing. And in fact, I'll take the easy way out and I'm gonna say it's recruiting. General Bowers is right. It is it is everything. If we do not get like the most talented people, right, to do these very difficult high-end technology things, like we might as well just not have this conversation, right? So like, I mean, I was on recruiting and I know how difficult it is. And then we're going to ask you to do something wholly different in terms of the skill level that we need you to recruit. Also, our whole, my Yankees fan thing, right? Which is like, this is the thing that we sell. We sell, hardest, most difficult, changes forever, transformation. We don't promise you a rose garden. It's going to be where, the Marine Corps thing that we're selling, maybe, or in many parts, incongruent for what we're trying to like now do, right? Like we should sell, like, I'm not saying what we should be doing, but like, how are we going to get nerds? Right? How are we going to get people who can run that Tampa? Right? How are we going to get a cyber person? Right? How are we going to do that? How are we going to attract and maintain? Right? I need cricket players in Denver. Like, well, I only been selling how great the Yankees have been for, since the all volunteer force began. So like, if we're not getting them in, then at the volumes required with the talent required, and who want to do this, like we're going to be dead on arrival, right? Then we got to maintain them and we have to have them stay in, right? Our organizational model is many Lance Corporals because they cost less than a master sergeant, right? Soft is many master sergeants, and it's very expensive, very small. So we, and you can tell General Bowers, I said that when you run into him, he's going to say the same thing. It's like, we got to win the recruiting fight or else everything else is dead on arrival. And the rest of us are just like a bunch of grunts, like bumping around, like arguing with each other about how to do range 400. As for you, Gabe. So I appreciate what you're doing out there. You are wrestling for the soul and future of the Corps, and everything else after that is just like a bunch of like old people shouting at each other. So keep up the great work. Get
Great.
recruiting right. That's the answer.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll circle back to Abe. You had a hand raised, and we'll probably take about 2 more questions until we close this out. Over to you, Abe.
Okay, then I'll dogpile them. I have two questions nested in one for you. Have you explored a manufacturing base in the first island chain, specifically for shipping or munitions? 1, and then 2, have you ever been to Iwakuni Harbor and explored the flexibility of that site?
I have been to Iwakuni Harbor. Everybody from Indo-PACOM should come out here because they have to understand the human terrain of the political environment, which is difficult to do from Hawaii. So again, your soft skills, your manipulation of the human terrain, the non-kinetics, those things that like they're not teaching places, right? The maneuver space as of right now is constricted both at Naha Port and Iwakuni due to the human terrain and political factors. So that is creating constraints and restraints, which we can operate in and can, with investment in time and resources, grow greater flexibility of. In terms of additive manufacturing, we're actually, we did that last week at Keen Sword and showcased that on a distant island. So that was a initial great first step. But in terms of like Matt Tracy, what he does every day, that's not a new thing, but it is in our mind. And I know MLG is working it. General Chalkley down there is starting to grow into like some fantastic spaces there.
Great.
And then I guess just that last follow-up, sorry, Dylan, is what kind of, I understand that, yeah, human terrain, very complex, and arguably the most impulsive and compulsive. What kind of ideas would you submit for investments into easing those constraints and restraints?
So those are when commanders have an understanding of those, they can make nuanced decision choices. And I'm not going to say like manipulate, but like just like going out into the souk, right? It takes time, money, effort, risk to go meet with the sheikh. But as soon as you start understanding what the sheikh's view of the world is, then you can start being like, oh, well, look, I have this. Whoa, look, our goals are aligned here, and I can mitigate your risk here. And oh, we could do this together. Oh, and I realized that that's a third rail. But that's an investment, right? So that takes time and money and energy, and you got to fly across the IDL, and that takes 4 months off your life each time you do that. So it's hard. And then, like at what level? And you're like, I have a headquarters that does that, it's USFJ. But like USFJ, so what I, again, focus prioritization. So if that's a thing, then like get commanders out to talk to those people, at the risk of whatever else they're not going to not do to do that. So that's the ish, as my kids would say.
Thank you, sir. All right, Joshua, this will be the last question from the audience. Go ahead.
Thanks again. And I just kind of going back to my previous question talking about the infantry in the future. How do we get the buy-in? Because so many dudes join the Marine Corps infantry after seeing everything that happened in the past 20 years and before that even. And then a lot of my peer group and some of our newer guys, we come in. My company went to Haiti for a humanitarian mission. We saw 1821 go out to Afghanistan for the non-combatant evacuation. We see these things, and then the guys who are coming in now see these things, and they don't realize that we're transferring more towards not the large scale of, hey, we're going to go fix bayonets, we're going to go close and stick cold blue American steel in the enemy's throats. It's now we're going to be supporting larger capabilities and maintaining our capability of precision strikes on the enemy's capability for command and control. How do we get their buy-in for that? Because it's going more away from the large scale idea of war that we've had in the past towards more. And I know the Warfighting side came out with the mass yield aiming letters, and I'm gonna harken back to that, but the soft like infantry at the conventional level, how do we get their buy-in for that? Because that seems to be one of the bigger, at least at my level, obviously not at the higher level, but at my level, that seems to be a bit of a point of concern, because it's almost impossible to get people to do anything if they don't have the buy-in, especially Lance Corporals and PFCs.
Do they like to hunt?
Some of them, the ones that aren't
Yep.
city boys.
They like to hunt. That's essentially what we're training you to do. Are you gonna go and like get like all of your buddies online in the forest and then put the other half of them on the other side and then use beaters and kill every single deer in the forest and that's it? Or do they like to go out and get that one 14-point buck that, like, when they do that, they're gonna be like, you know, gods in the neighborhood or the township or their families? Like, they need to understand that this is what's going on. The change is that they're literally becoming a hunter of an exquisite thing. All right, that's the first. The second is, once they understand that they are being hunted, it also changes the game. So that phone that you're on, my phone right here, I have no guarantee that this is not being recorded by somebody else other than us, right? I know that I am being hunted right now, okay? And is it 24/7? Is it all the time? I don't know. This changes the paradigm of how I thought about my life as a professional warfighter, right? I am now an exquisite hunter, but also the prey. And if that doesn't get people jacked up, then you're probably just here for the fantasy of the, first-person shooter video game that you played a lot of, right? Like, we're talking about an entire change in which everything you do is in play. Like, you are the hunter of the 14-point buck, and every other deer in the forest is coming to get you. Like, you're talking about buying, you're talking about excitement for the warfighting profession and want to be engaged at an intellectual and physical level, emotional level. That gets me engaged. They can come out here on UDP and they can feel it, and they can move out here and they can live it. And hopefully that's how we get their buy-in.
Thank you, sir. All
Thanks,
right, sir. One last one to kind of close us out here. So you talked earlier about the Marine Corps' challenge in, breaking out of its paradigm and realizing that, the future is in the joint fight. And then, the challenges of replicating that in our service level training exercises and whatnot. You also mentioned the challenge that we're facing of saying no so that we can say yes. So as your role in the MEF, and, also drawing on your experiences with 4th Marines, what are some of those other sacred cows that we're clutching, too closely to the chest, in your opinion? What are some of those questions that we need to seriously look at and, ask, should this be a no, so that we can say to it the yes that enables us in this future fight?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Since a lot of our, I think, people, or a lot of the Marine Corps' like discussion revolves around this infantry centric ground combat element kind of discussion, because that is the life that we live. That is the life we have lived in the past. And I think a lot of those feelings or discussions are holding us back, to get to that next place. And I'll just say that the heroic worship of the live fire range. We have an organization which the person that runs the best live fire range gets the best fit rep. And then that person who runs the best live fire range gets to become the company XO. And then the company XO that runs the best live fire range gets to go to, whatever, TBS to do live fire ranges. And then so on and so forth. Pretty soon, the best company commander is the best live fire range. He gets to be the OPSO. The OPSO runs the best live fire range, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And then when you arrive at 4th Reg and you're like, I want to go do this live fire range at Fuji. And I said, that's fine, but you get no credit from me for that. I give you no credit on your fit rep for a live fire range. The live fire range is to prepare you for these basic skills, various levels of complexity. But I assume now that you've come out here on your deployment that you've already done those things. So I'm going to give you credit for an exercise that you're going to run with a joint or combined partner that's reflected into the information space so that we can compete. And that's whoa. Wait a second. I am not prepared for that. Right. And that's what we should be judging. Okay, hey, go down the parking lot and tell me how many joint capabilities can you talk to right now? Can you talk to a B-1 bomber overhead? Can you talk to the cruiser out there? Can you talk to the Army Special Forces unit in Singapore? Oh, you can't. Well, okay, why don't you go up there and run your live fire range then, right? So I think that this is the wait, let me see your cyber defense. Let me, these are the things we have to grow to. And I do think to Mill's point that those things are holding us back in many respects. Right. So then having said that, we can't be losing our soul, but I'm not worried about our soul. Actually, I think our soul is very strong. I think our ethos is very strong. I think that we can assume some risk there to get to a non-GCE centric discussion to get to the capability sets that we need. How's that?
That's great, sir. Appreciate it. I think that's a good spot to end here. So, sir, again, thank you for joining us. I'll leave it to you if you want to have any closing remarks to this audience, and then obviously to the audience that watches this when we post this online. I'll turn it over to you for any final thoughts. And also, if you don't mind, sir, as one more aside, when we were lieutenants, you had us read a important study. It was Learning from the Stones, Go Approach to Strategy. If you could leave us today, maybe if not that, maybe something new that this audience could take and do some self-study to help them again get in this mindset of what the really the current and future fight will require.
That's too important a question for me to just blast away from the hip. So I will think more about that and hopefully give you guys something that one is worth the time investment. leaving thoughts. One, what a professional thrill to see many of my old friends. That is unbelievable. I would love to see the list of the people. It's just great to see you guys congregating together to push the envelope from an intellectual standpoint. It's like being a happy father, and like you look at, oh my gosh, look at my child in Harvard. I don't know, whatever. It's a thrill. I'd say these things. One, have faith in the organization. Like, this is a great organization. It's very strong. It's the most dynamic. Second thing is we're winning. We are absolutely winning. Everybody wants a piece of the United States Marine Corps and 3MAP. It's like I have to beat people back because everybody wants to play. We're the game in town. People love what we're selling. People love the direction. We're thought leaders within the Joint Force. We're out in front. We're leading a revolution. We will look back at this time as, aside from 1989 and the maneuver warfare revolution, this time period right now will be even a greater point of organizational change, which will be analogous and comparable to the amphibious warfare revolution in the 30s. So be excited, be engaged, which you already are, keep the faith, and we'll continue to win. Semper Fi.
Hurrah. Thank you, sir. Thank you again for your time. Audience, thank you all for joining. I appreciate the intellectual curiosity and just the dedication to learning that everyone here on this call and that really does participate with the Warfighting Society, regardless of chapter, brings to your involvement. So, sir, thanks again. Godspeed out there. Have a great work day. And everyone else, I'll work with Damien to get this posted. If you want to go back and re-listen or share with any of your colleagues, coworkers, or friends. So again, thank you all for participating and have a great day.
All right.
Rosser, thank you.